The first thing I noticed when I stepped out onto the porch that morning was how still everything felt. Our little cul-de-sac in Virginia usually came alive with the chatter of sprinklers, kids on bikes, or the occasional barking dog. But that morning, just silence, broken only by the hum of cicadas in the oak trees that lined the street. My wife, Jessica, was inside nursing our newborn, Ava. She had only been home from the hospital for 3 weeks, and the rhythm of our days had shifted entirely. I wasn't on deployment anymore. My service with the teams was behind me, but the instinct to stay vigilant, to scan the world for threats, never left. Even in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the houses looked like they'd been copy-pasted from a realtor's dream catalog, I kept watch. I never imagined that threat would show up wearing pearls, clutching a clipboard, and reeking of self-importance. Karen. She wasn't just any Karen. She was our Karen, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association. Mid-50s, bleach blonde bob, and the kind of sunglasses that made her look like she was perpetually auditioning for Real Housewives of Fairfax County. She had a way of showing up uninvited, always with that pinched expression like everyone else's existence was a personal inconvenience. I saw her marching up the walkway that morning, heels clicking against the concrete, lips pursed so tightly they were barely visible. "Daniel," she said before she even reached the steps, "we need to talk." I didn't move. I just wrapped my fingers tighter around the coffee mug in my hand and leaned against the porch column. "Morning, Karen." "There's nothing morning about it," she snapped. "Your wife is in violation." I raised a brow. "Violation of what?" "The HOA's guidelines," she said, thrusting the clipboard at me like it was a badge of authority. "She's been seen outside with that infant without a proper stroller cover. Do you have any idea how many contaminants float in the air? Do you understand the liability this places on the neighborhood?" I stared at her, stunned for a moment. "You're worried about liability because my wife took our baby for a walk." She sniffed. "It's unsanitary and against our standards of community health." I had dealt with terrorists, pirates, and warlords, but nothing quite prepared me for the audacity of this woman. I let out a slow laugh, shaking my head. "Karen, we're not discussing this. You don't get a say in how we raise our daughter." Her eyes narrowed, sharp and glittering. "If your wife won't comply, then I'll have to insist on alternative measures. Infants need structure, oversight, protection. Someone has to make sure she's safe." I felt my chest tighten. There was something in her tone, something that went beyond her usual harassment about lawn height or mailbox paint. "Alternative measures?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes." She tilted her chin upward. "If necessary, I'll take this to the board. Or perhaps it would be simpler if your wife just handed her over for a few hours each day. I could supervise, make sure everything is done properly. Formula instead of whatever messy hippie thing she's doing. Nap schedules, sterilized environment." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My pulse thudded in my ears, and I set my coffee mug down before it shattered in my hand. "Let me make sure I understand," I said slowly, stepping closer, my voice dropping to the tone I hadn't used since interrogations overseas. "You think you're entitled to take my newborn out of my wife's arms and raise her yourself?" Karen's jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. "I'm saying someone has to take responsibility. New mothers make mistakes. I've seen her outside at all hours, looking exhausted, unkempt, unstable. I won't allow this neighborhood's reputation to be dragged down by negligence." Behind me, the screen door creaked open. Jessica stood in the doorway, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes, Ava bundled against her chest. She looked fragile, tired, but when Karen's gaze flicked to her, Jessica's hold on our daughter tightened like steel. "Get off our property," Jessica said, her voice trembling with anger. Karen raised her hands, feigning innocence. "I'm only trying to help. If you refuse, then I'll escalate. Don't test me. The HOA has resources. I'll do what must be done." That was the moment something shifted in me. I had wanted to live here quietly, to put the past behind me, to just be a husband and a father. But the look in Karen's eyes told me this wasn't going to end with a nasty email or a fine. She believed she had the power to take what was ours. I stepped down off the porch, closing the distance between us until she had to tilt her head back to meet my eyes. "Karen," I said evenly, every syllable cold as steel, "you don't know me. You don't know what I've done. And you sure as hell don't know what I'll do to protect my family. Walk away." For the first time, I saw her flinch. But only for a second. Then her lips twisted into a smug smile. "We'll see about that," she whispered, before turning on her heel and marching back down the walkway. I stood there, fists clenched, watching her retreat until the sound of her heels faded into silence. When I turned, Jessica was staring at me, her face pale, fear and fury tangled together in her eyes. "She's not going to stop," she said softly. I didn't answer right away, because Jessica was right. And deep down, I already knew. Karen had declared war, and she had no idea she'd picked the wrong man. For the next few days, it was like living with a storm cloud hanging just over our roof. Karen didn't show up again immediately, but her presence lingered. Flyers slipped under our door, notes taped to our mailbox, emails with subject lines in all caps: "Urgent. Infant safety violation." Jessica read one of them aloud while I fixed her some coffee. Her voice shook, and she had to pause halfway through. "Failure to comply will result in mandatory intervention," she said, staring at the paper like it was written in another language. "The HOA reserves the right to act in the best interest of the community, especially in cases of proven negligence." I took the note from her hands, folded it once, and dropped it in the trash. "Empty threats," I muttered. "She's trying to scare you." Jessica leaned back against the counter, Ava cradled in her arms. "She doesn't scare me. She makes me furious." The way she looked at Ava, like she was some prize to be claimed. Her lip trembled. "Daniel, what if she actually tries something?" That was the thing. I'd spent my whole career studying the difference between threats that were bluffs and ones that were ticking bombs. Karen didn't have weapons or soldiers, but she had arrogance, authority, however fake, and a dangerous obsession with control. That made her unpredictable. 2 days later, it escalated. Jessica was on the porch rocking Ava in the late afternoon light when Karen pulled up in a black Lexus. She didn't come alone this time. 2 men stepped out of the car with her, one in a pressed polo shirt, the other in a blazer despite the heat. Both carried clipboards, the kind of props people use when they want to look official. I was inside, but the moment I heard Karen's voice, I dropped what I was doing and strode to the door. "Your compliance is overdue," Karen was saying, her tone loud and commanding. "The board has already approved preliminary intervention. These men are here to inspect your household." Jessica clutched Ava tighter. "You're not coming inside." Karen gave a dramatic sigh, then turned to the men. "Document her refusal." That's when I stepped out. My presence alone made them hesitate, broad shoulders filling the doorway, arms crossed, voice low and steady. "You've got 3 seconds to get off my property." The man in the blazer cleared his throat, trying to mask his nerves. "Sir, we're representatives of the HOA Compliance Committee. We have the authority. You have no authority here." I cut in. "Not over my home, not over my wife, and sure as hell not over my daughter." Karen's eyes blazed. "Daniel, if you don't stand aside, we'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement. Your resistance will be noted." I took one slow step forward, letting the weight of my stare do the talking. "Go ahead. Call them. I'll be the one filing charges for trespassing and harassment." The men shifted uneasily, clearly regretting whatever favor Karen had roped them into. Finally, the one in the polo muttered, "Ma'am, maybe we should." "Fine," Karen snapped, cutting him off. "But don't think this is over. The board will escalate." She spun on her heel, marching back to the Lexus, the men trailing after her like chastened interns. As their car disappeared down the street, Jessica let out a shaky breath. "Daniel," she whispered, "she's getting more desperate." I pulled her close, wrapping both her and Ava in my arms. "Let her escalate. The more she pushes, the more she exposes herself. I'll be ready." But even as I said it, I felt the tension crawling under my skin. I wasn't on deployment, but my body fell back into the old patterns, checking locks twice, scanning the street before bed, memorizing license plates of unfamiliar cars. The enemy might not be armed, But the threat was real. That night, as I sat in the living room with the baby monitor glowing beside me, Jessica finally asked the question that had been building. "Why aren't you more scared?" she whispered. I looked at her, at the woman who had been my anchor through years of silence and separation. Because fear doesn't help. Preparation does. And if Karen thinks she can waltz in here and take what's ours, then she has no idea who she's dealing with. Jessica studied me, her eyes glistening. "You mean you'd actually fight her?" I leaned forward, clasping her hand. "Jess, I fought men who thought they were invincible. Men who had armies, weapons, power. And every single one of them had the same weakness. They underestimated what a father, a husband, a protector would do when you threaten what he loves most. Karen is no different." The words hung between us, heavy but steadying. 2 nights later, I proved myself right. I woke to the faint crunch of gravel outside. Quiet. Too quiet. My training kicked in instantly. I slipped out of bed, grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the nightstand, and moved silently to the front window. Headlights were off, but I caught the outline of the Lexus parked just beyond the curb. And there she was, Karen, standing in my yard at 2 a.m., holding a phone flashlight and peering toward the nursery window. Every muscle in my body tightened. I moved fast but silent, opening the front door without a sound. By the time she realized I was there, I was already on the porch. "Lose something," I said, my voice like gravel in the dark. Karen froze, caught in the beam of her own flashlight. For a second, I saw something raw in her expression. Not guilt, not fear, but obsession. "I knew it," she hissed. "That child isn't safe with her. I can see it. She's too tired, too fragile. I'll fix this. I'll make sure the baby's raised properly." The bat was still in my hand, though I held it low, not threatening, yet. "Step 1 foot closer, Karen," I warned, "and you'll regret it for the rest of your life." She straightened, her chin trembling but her voice sharp. "You think your military record scares me? You're unstable, aggressive. I'll prove it. And when I do, that baby will be mine." That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore. Karen had crossed into dangerous territory. She wasn't going to stop. Not until something, or someone, stopped her. The next morning, sunlight felt brittle and unreal, as if the world had been painted on glass. I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time for 3 nights. Jessica moved through the house with the practiced care of a woman who had learned to measure her breath so it wouldn't wake the baby. Ava was sleeping in the nursery, a small bundle of peace in a room that felt like the last safe place on earth. At noon, the Lexus pulled into the cul-de-sac like a dark punctuation mark. Karen stepped out with that same clipped walk, sunglasses on even though the sun had no mercy. But this time she didn't come alone. 2 men, different ones from before, followed her, and behind them, a uniformed county sheriff's deputy walked with a folder tucked under his arm. His badge caught the sun. "You called them?" I asked Jessica, quietly but with an edge that cut through the kitchen air. "No," she answered. Her fingers were white around the coffee mug. "He called. The deputy said she filed a protective oversight petition, some kind of citizen concern form. He said he had to investigate." When the deputy knocked on the door, every part of me locked into gear that I hadn't used in a long time. Situational assessment, risk calculation, exit and entry points, the smallest details that tell you whether a scene will go sideways. I opened the door, posture neutral, voice calm. "Deputy," I said, "how can I help you?" He flipped his folder open and read from a form like a man who had been trained to remove emotion from words. "We received a complaint alleging the welfare of an infant is at risk. The complainant states the mother is unable to properly care for the child and requested the county perform a welfare check. I need to come inside and speak with the mother." I looked at Jessica. She nodded once, eyes wide but steady. "Go ahead," I told the deputy, and stepped back to let him in. I stayed in the hallway, where I could see into the nursery and across the living room. My hands were folded behind my back, so I wouldn't look like I was reaching for anything. Karen stood in the doorway like a judge, watching the deputy with smug satisfaction. The men behind her murmured, taking notes as if they'd already won. I could feel my blood move through my veins, heat and ice at the same time. The deputy's questions were procedural: name, age of child, feeding schedule, sleeping arrangements. Jessica answered each one like a metronome, voice steadying with every detail she recited. The deputy glanced toward the crib and then at Karen. "Ms. Turner," he said, no trace of the neighborly warmth. "Your complaint states that Ms. Harris has been neglectful. Do you have anything else to add?" Karen stepped forward, chin high. "Yes, I have watched for weeks. There are concerns about the mother's demeanor, her ability to follow a schedule, and her mental state. I'm only asking for the county to do what's best for the child." The deputy took notes. His eyes flicked to me, searching for a reaction. I gave him none. Some part of me wanted to tell him what Karen didn't know, that my life had been spent in places where a wrong step could get a family killed. But this wasn't the time for confessions. This was the time for precision. "You understand, if there's probable cause, we may have to involve Child Protective Services," he said finally. "That's standard." Jessica's breath hitched. Ava stirred in her sleep and let out a small, plaintive cry. Without thinking, Jessica moved toward the nursery to pick her up. Karen's hand shot out as if to stop her, an instinctive grab for control. The air thickened. "Don't touch my daughter," Karen warned, voice low. Jessica pulled Ava into her chest, as if that would make them invisible. "Stay away from my family," she said. It was the look that came next that tightened my throat. Karen's expression was no longer merely smug. It was predatory. She believed she had leverage, and leverage can be intoxicating. The deputy folded his paper closed. "At this point, I need to make a decision based on what I'm seeing." He cleared his throat. "Do you have any history of mental health crises, Miss Harris? Hospitalizations? Substance abuse?" "No," Jessica answered. "I've been to the OB many times. My postpartum checkups are all clear. I'm breastfeeding exclusively and monitoring Ava's weight. We have the pediatrician's number. We're not neglectful." The deputy hesitated. He looked at Karen, then at the third-floor nursery window where sunlight pooled like forgiveness. I could see the gears turning. Then Karen did something reckless. She crossed onto our porch and, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she said, "You don't have to do everything so dramatic." Before she could finish, the world snapped into motion. I didn't plan the move. It unfolded like muscle memory. A lifetime of trained reflexes, breathing, centering, moving with economy, took over. I stepped forward, hand out, width of a man's palm between Karen and Jessica, warning without violence. "Step off my porch," I said. Karen smiled through her teeth and shoved past me, barely. An inch further, and she would have hit the baby monitor on the table. I reached out and caught her wrist. The moment my fingers closed around her arm, a dozen things happened at once. Karen's eyes widened with real fear. Her men stepped back. The deputy's mouth formed the shape of a question. I said, "Step back." I repeated, voice low. Karen twisted, hard, trying to pull her arm free. She wasn't small. She was wiry, desperate, but she wasn't prepared for the leverage I used. Her phone clattered to the porch. The deputy stepped between us. "Sir, please, let go," he said. My grip was firm, but not crushing. She assaulted my wife. It was a simple statement that carried weight. Assault. It was a line. If it got recorded, if photos were taken, this little theater she'd staged could unravel. Karen's face crumpled, like someone finally realizing that the world had margins she hadn't accounted for. She began. But the men she'd brought were suddenly uncomfortable. One pulled out his phone, but not to take notes. He dialed. The other looked at the deputy with an expression that begged for legality to save them. The deputy sighed and radioed in for backup. "I'm going to need a supervisor," he said. "Domestic disturbance in progress." For a second, it looked like this whole thing could blow up into hand-to-hand, a tangle of egos and accusations on a suburban porch. Then something else happened. A neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez from 3 houses down, walked out with her morning mail and stopped dead, eyes taking in the scene. Behind her, 2 more neighbors paused, an elderly man and a teenage mother with a stroller. The world shifted. Witnesses existed now, and witnesses carry truth. Karen, however, had one last card. She turned to the deputy, voice trembling with righteous anger. "Officer, I have evidence." I can provide testimony that this household is. The deputy held up a hand. Ma'am, for right now, I'm going to ask you to step back and leave. If there are charges, the county will handle it. Karen looked as if she might explode. Her hands shook. For a moment, I thought she'd reach for the baby monitor to pry it from the table and smash it. Then she did something I still can't explain. She stormed off, but not before swiveling her head to me and hissing, "You haven't seen the last of me." She got in the car and left, tires crunching gravel as if she were stamping on the entire cul-de-sac. The deputy spoke to Jessica in a measured tone, telling her that they would follow up, that there were forms, that there were protections. He took down statements and cataloged the shoves and the phone drop. He left a number and promised a supervisor would call. After the deputy left, the house felt both raw and sacred. Jessica dissolved into tears, the kind that carry every sleepless night and every unspoken fear. I held her and Ava and let them cry into me until their breaths evened out. When the adrenaline finally ebbed, reality filtered back in. There were forms to fill, emails to be written, and the knowledge that Karen could return, empowered by anger and humiliation. I sat on the porch, Ava in my lap now, and watched the street. The world looked ordinary. Mailboxes, trimmed hedges, a child's basketball hoop. But underneath it all was the knowledge that ordinary can fracture in an instant. It wasn't over. Karen had been stopped today, but not defeated. She would regroup. She would talk to board members, stir other neighbors, and maybe, if she was clever enough, find a way to make the law do what her conscience could not. That night, as Jessica slept holding Ava on her chest, I sat alone in the living room with the house lights low. The seal in me cataloged lessons and contingencies like a checklist taped to the inside of a helmet. I wrote down names. I made a plan, tighter locks, a camera system, a neighborhood chat warning. But beneath the logistical response was something more elemental, a vow that no one would take my daughter, that no one would ever make my family doubt their safety again. I whispered into the dark, not sure whether I was speaking to the house or to myself. If she comes back, I said, I won't give her a second chance. Outside, the wind moved through the oaks and the cul-de-sac held its breath. For the first time since we brought Ava home, I felt the path forward sharpen. The battle lines were drawn. The thing that had been a petty neighbor's feud had become, by degrees, a war for our family's peace. And wars, I thought, are never won by accident. Karen vanished for almost a week. No Lexus in the cul-de-sac. No flyers. No notes. Jessica and I both knew it wasn't because she'd given up. It was because she was planning something. A person like Karen didn't retreat. She reloaded. We tried to live normally in the meantime. Jessica focused on Ava's rhythms, feeding, sleeping, tiny coos that filled the rooms with fragile joy. I kept my hands busy, fixing a squeaky hinge, mowing the lawn, installing security cameras on the corners of the house. Every time I climbed a ladder, I felt the eyes of neighbors on me. Some waved, some averted their gaze. Word had spread about what happened on the porch. One evening, Mrs. Alvarez came over with a casserole, her voice hushed. "We saw everything," she said. "Karen's not right. People are starting to talk. You're not alone in this." That solidarity mattered more than I could admit. I'd been trained to work in teams, to trust men with my life. Civilian life often felt lonelier, but that night, standing with a casserole in my hands, I realized even suburbs had their brotherhoods and sisterhoods when danger came knocking. Still, Jessica's nerves stayed frayed. Every creak at night made her flinch. Sometimes she'd hover over Ava's crib, whispering, "She's not taking you. I promise." It cut me deep to see her like that, strong but cracked, a woman who should have been basking in newborn bliss instead forced into survival mode. Then Karen made her move. It was Saturday afternoon when the knock came. Not the brisk rap of a neighbor or the casual tap of a delivery guy. This was a hammering knock. Demanding. Threatening. I opened the door, and there she was, Karen, flanked by 3 HOA board members and another deputy. She carried a folder thick with papers, her expression triumphant, almost feverish. "Daniel," she announced, loud enough for half the block to hear. We're here to enforce board action. The deputy glanced at me, visibly uncomfortable. Sir, there's been a formal complaint filed. They're alleging the safety of the child is compromised. Technically, I need to escort CPS for a welfare check. They're on their way. Jessica appeared behind me, Ava cradled against her chest. She didn't speak, but her knuckles whitened on the baby blanket. Karen pointed like a prosecuting attorney. There, look at her. Exhausted, barely able to stand. That infant deserves stability, not chaos. We have grounds to remove her immediately. Something inside me snapped, not recklessly, but with the clean clarity of a man who has faced down threats 1,000 times and knows exactly what to do. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door gently behind me so Jessica and Ava were safe inside. The board members shifted, uncertain, their clipboards suddenly feeling flimsy against the weight of the moment. You're not taking my daughter, I said quietly. Not today. Not ever. Karen's voice rose, shrill. You can't stop us. This is bigger than you. The community. The community? I barked out a laugh, loud and sharp. Lady, I fought in villages halfway around the world where community meant surviving rocket fire and insurgents in the night. Don't you dare stand on my porch and act like some HOA bylaw gives you the right to steal a child. Her face reddened, but I didn't stop. I stepped closer, locking my eyes onto hers until I saw the flicker of doubt she tried to mask. You see, Karen, I said, my voice dropping to that low, steady register my teammates once called my command tone. You've underestimated something. I'm not just a homeowner. I'm not just a husband. I'm a Navy SEAL. My life has been about protecting the innocent, about standing between danger and the people I love. You came here thinking you could intimidate us, but all you've done is declare war on the wrong damn family. The street had gone silent. Neighbors peeked from blinds, lingered on sidewalks, phones discreetly lifted to record. The deputy shifted, sensing the tide turning. Karen tried to rally, waving her folder. This is legal action. I cut her off with one last strike, delivered not with fists, but with words sharpened by absolute conviction. No piece of paper, no clipboard, no HOA committee will ever outrank the oath I swore. And that oath wasn't just to my country. It was to my family. You come near my wife and daughter again, and you won't just be facing board meetings and bylaws. You'll be facing me. And I promise you, that's a battle you don't want. The deputy cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Ma'am, he said to Karen, his tone edged with finality. I've seen enough. This isn't a CPS matter. This is harassment. If you don't leave right now, I'll be the one filing charges. The color drained from her face. She sputtered, looked to the board members for backup, but they shifted uneasily, refusing to meet her eyes. Finally, one of them muttered, "This isn't what we signed up for," and turned to leave. The others followed. Karen stood frozen, trembling with rage and humiliation, then spun on her heel and stormed back to the Lexus. The deputy gave me a nod, a silent acknowledgement that the line had been drawn. When the cars pulled away, the cul-de-sac erupted in murmurs. Neighbors came out, Mrs. Alvarez, the teen mom, even the grumpy retired vet from the corner lot. They offered handshakes, pats on the back, words of solidarity. For the first time since Ava had been born, the street felt alive with unity instead of suspicion. I went inside, where Jessica was waiting. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "Is it over?" I pulled her close, kissed her forehead, and rested a hand on Ava's tiny back. "It's over," I said. "She won't be back. And even if she tries, she knows now what she's up against." Jessica leaned into me, and Ava stirred softly, safe between us. The storm had passed. For the first time in weeks, the house felt like a home again, not a fortress, not a battleground, but a sanctuary. That night, as I rocked Ava to sleep, I thought about everything we'd been through. Karen had wanted control. She'd tried to twist authority into power, to bend fear into compliance. But she forgot one thing. Real power doesn't come from clipboards or bylaws. It comes from love, from the unbreakable bond between a father and his child. I whispered into the darkness, my words just for Ava. No one will ever take you from us. Not while I breathe. Outside, the cul-de-sac lay quiet under the stars. Ordinary again. Safe again. For now. And if danger ever came knocking again, it would learn the same lesson Karen had. This family does not break. This family fights back. If you enjoyed this intense story, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping, cinematic tales. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next thriller. Your support keeps these stories coming.